Sunday morning sunlight washed gently across the quiet Atlanta street, the kind of warm, peaceful morning that made Lawrence Carter feel grateful just to be alive. His church jacket was still neatly pressed, Evelyn's Bible still warm in her hands. They had just returned from service, hearts calm, spirits steady. But that calm shattered in an instant. A voice cut through the hallway like a blade. "Hi, don't rent to filthy black old folks. Get out, before I drag you out myself." Lawrence froze mid-step. Evelyn's breath caught in her chest. Standing in front of them, blocking their path, was Colton Reeves, the new owner of Ridgeview Heights Apartments. Young, arrogant, expensive suit that screamed privilege, and a smirk carved into his face like he enjoyed causing pain. He eyed Lawrence's modest Sunday suit and let out a low, disgusted laugh. "You think because you've lived here 23 years, you own something? This building is changing. It's for a better class of tenant now. Not charity cases, and definitely not people like you." He spat on the ground near Lawrence's shoes. Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. Soft tears. Silent tears. The kind that came from a wound deeper than words could touch. Lawrence gently took her hand. "Come on, Evelyn. Let's go." But Colton wasn't done. "Cruel men rarely are. This place is going upscale," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "And you're not part of the demographic I want in my building." Lawrence didn't respond. Not because he was afraid, but because he was a man who had spent 70 years learning that silence sometimes carried more strength than rage. What Colton didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that this quiet, elderly black couple had a son who had been abandoned as a child, raised with love in this very building, and had grown up to become one of the most respected federal judges in the entire state, Judge Malcolm Carter. But for now, only the Carters knew that truth. The couple walked slowly back to their apartment. Evelyn's hands were still trembling. Lawrence's breathing was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Inside their apartment, the afternoon sun painted warm streaks across the living room walls. Every photograph, every scratch on the hardwood floors, every plant Evelyn tended, all of it whispered memories of 23 years. Lawrence settled into his favorite chair and unfolded his newspaper out of habit. His eyes caught a headline he never expected to see. Housing discrimination rising across America. Elderly black tenants targeted. He stared at the words. Once, twice, a third time. These weren't just statistics anymore. They were standing at his front door. In the kitchen, Evelyn watered her plants, humming the same hymn she'd sung for decades. But her voice wavered today. Her eyes kept drifting toward the fridge, to the photo she touched every morning. A young black man in a graduation gown, smiling with a pride that lit up the room. Malcolm Carter. Law school graduation. 2002. Her baby boy. Lawrence looked at the photo, then at his wife. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I think our piece is over. Something's coming." She swallowed hard. "And if we can't handle it, Lawrence?" He held her trembling hand. "Then we won't handle it. Alone." They didn't see the shadow standing silently in the hallway outside their door. Someone had heard everything. The next morning, a harsh knock shook their door. "Open up, mandatory inspection." But this wasn't an inspection. This was Colton Reeves' first attack. The knock came at 7:42 a.m. Hard, sharp, aggressive. The kind of knock that didn't ask permission, it demanded obedience. Evelyn wiped her hands on a towel, startled. "Nobody knocks this early," she whispered. Lawrence stood from his chair slowly, his joints stiff, his instincts sharper than ever. He approached the door with caution, each step heavy with the memory of yesterday's humiliation. He opened it, and there stood Colton Reeves, clipboard in hand, smile carved into his face like a weapon. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," he said with fake sweetness. "I'm here for a mandatory inspection of your unit. City regulations." Evelyn blinked in confusion. "We weren't notified about any inspection. We always receive written notice." Colton stepped past her without waiting for permission, walking into their home like he owned not just the building, but the people inside it. Last-minute scheduling, he said casually. These things happen. Lawrence's jaw tightened. He knew this wasn't regulation. This wasn't random. This was the beginning. Colton moved through the apartment with the eagerness of someone searching for trouble, desperate to find any flaw that could be twisted into a violation. He opened cabinets, checked behind furniture, pressed his fingers over the window frames looking for dust, photographed a water stain on the ceiling with exaggerated delight. Ah, now this is a problem, he declared. A major habitability concern. Very serious. Lawrence stepped closer. That stain has been there since 2018. We reported it 5 different times. You never fixed it. Colton didn't even look up from his clipboard. It's documented now as tenant-caused damage, he said, voice cold as steel. That's what matters. Evelyn's face fell. Her safe sanctuary, her plants, her photographs, her memories, she felt them slipping away, one manipulated image at a time. Colton paused at a framed picture on the wall. Lawrence on his retirement day, shaking hands with his supervisor after 30-plus years of service. Colton chuckled. Cute. Very. Nostalgic. Then he walked out. No explanation. No courtesy. Just the echo of his footsteps in the cold. Smell of his expensive cologne fading in the hallway. Evelyn shut the door with trembling hands. Lawrence? What is he doing to us? Her voice was thin, breaking. Lawrence looked toward the window, his mind working, his heart steady. He's trying to push us out, he said quietly. And he thinks we're too old to fight back. Silence settled in the room like a heavy fog. That evening, Lawrence sat alone in the dim living room. The apartment felt different now, as if danger had seeped into the walls. His phone buzzed. Malcolm. The moment he answered, his son's voice filled the room, warm, steady, sharp with concern. Pop? Mama told me someone's been bothering you. Lawrence hesitated. He didn't want to be a burden. Didn't want to pull his son into stress or conflict. It's nothing we can't handle, he said softly. Malcolm didn't buy it. Pop, I know your voice. Tell me what's going on. Lawrence exhaled slowly, the weight pulling at his chest. He's looking for a reason to get rid of us, he admitted. A silence followed, not empty, but electric. Then Malcolm spoke, tone firm, unwavering. Pop, listen to me. If this gets worse, if he tries anything else, you call me. Immediately. Promise me. Lawrence closed his eyes. I promise, son. But deep down he already knew. Colton wasn't done. This was just his opening move. 2 days later, Lawrence opened his mailbox and saw a white envelope with gold lettering. The moment he touched it, his hands began to shake. It was the letter that would change everything. For 23 years, Lawrence Carter walked to the lobby mailbox with the same calm, steady rhythm. Same steps. Same habits. Same quiet gratitude that life still gave him peaceful mornings. But this morning was different. He felt it before he even saw the envelope. The lobby was unusually silent. The kind of silence that warns you something isn't right. He opened the metal mailbox door and sorted through the stack automatically. Power bill, water bill, church bulletin, grocery coupons, and then a single crisp white envelope with gold embossed lettering, Reeves Property Group. Lawrence's heart dropped. His fingers trembled before he even tore it open. Inside, the words were clean, sharp, clinical, but they hit like a hammer. Notice to vacate 30 days effective immediately. For a moment, the letters blurred in front of his eyes. He read them again, and again, and again. It still didn't change. He felt the weight of every lie sinking into his bones. Repeated lease violations, unauthorized occupants, tenant caused, structural damage, failure to comply with inspection requirements. Every single word. Manufactured, fabricated, cruel by design, unauthorized occupants. It had been just him and Evelyn for more than 2 decades. Damage? They'd begged management for years to repair the leak. Failure to comply? He'd let Colton walk through his home like a king inspecting his kingdom. Lawrence felt something inside him crack. Not fear, not weakness, something older. Something deeper. Betrayal. He walked back to the apartment slowly, moving like a man carrying the weight of an entire lifetime on his shoulders. Inside, Evelyn stood at the stove, humming her usual Sunday hymn. The familiar smell of eggs and coffee filled the air. A normal morning. She turned, saw his face, and the spatula fell from her hand. Lawrence. What happened? What's wrong? He couldn't even speak. Just placed the letter gently on the table. Evelyn read the first line. Her knees gave out. She sank into the chair, tears already rising. Unauthorized occupants? Lawrence, it's just us. It's always been just us. I know. Damage? We begged them for help. I know. Her voice cracked completely. He can really do this. Just lie? And take away our home after everything we've done, right? Lawrence took her hand, the hand he'd held for 50 years, and squeezed it tight. He's doing it, Evelyn. He wants us gone. He's not even trying to hide it. 1 hour later, Lawrence walked into the property office, a place he had never set foot in during 23 years of perfect tenancy. The receptionist, a young woman named Donna, paled when she saw him. Mr. Carter? How can I help you? I need to speak with Mr. Reeves, Lawrence said, voice steady. Before she could answer, the office door swung open. Colton Reeves stepped out with a fresh cup of coffee and a grin that made Lawrence's blood run cold. Well, if it isn't my favorite tenant, he said loudly. Come to discuss your moving plans? Excellent. I'm glad you're being realistic. Lawrence held up the eviction notice. This letter is a lie. Colton sipped his coffee. The documentation says otherwise, Mr. Carter. This is our home. 23 years without a single violation. Colton stepped close, too close, his smile fading into something darker. I don't care about your history, he whispered. I don't care about your perfect record. He leaned in, breath warm with arrogance. And I don't care about 2 old black people taking up space in my building. That word, that venom hung in the air like poison. For the first time in 70 years. Lawrence felt anger burn like fire, not loud. Not wild. Quiet. Controlled. Dangerous. He turned and walked out, eyes no longer defeated, but calculating, because this time, they wouldn't be silent. Back home, Evelyn sat at the table, broken. Lawrence stared at his phone, thumb hovering over a single name, Malcolm. He had never asked his son for help, but today, he would. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that settles after something precious breaks. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, her hands clasped together, knuckles pale with tension. The eviction notice lay in front of her like a death certificate. She stared at it as if staring long enough would erase the words. Her shoulders shook with every breath. Lawrence stood across the kitchen, leaning against the counter, eyes fixed on his wife. The woman who'd prayed with him, fought with him, built a life with him, now trembling in fear in the home they once called sanctuary. He'd always told her he would protect her. He'd always believed he could. But today, he felt powerless for the first time in decades. The clock ticked slowly, painfully. Each second felt like an insult. Finally, Evelyn looked up, tears spilling down her cheeks. Lawrence, I can't do this. I can't start over at my age. Not after everything we've been through. He moved toward her, sitting beside her, taking her shaking hands between his. My love, you don't deserve any of this. None of it. She sobbed harder, her voice cracking. Why is he doing this to us? We paid every bill. We followed every rule. We never asked for anything we didn't earn. Lawrence swallowed hard. This wasn't just a building being taken from them. This was their dignity being torn apart. He looked at the picture on the refrigerator. A younger man in a suit, radiant smile, cap and gown thrown into the air. Malcolm, the son they had prayed for. The boy who arrived broken and terrified. The man who rose higher than anyone ever expected. Lawrence felt something shift inside him. A quiet resolve. He walked to the counter where his phone was charging. Picked it up slowly, almost reluctantly. For a long moment, he just stared at Malcolm's contact photo. He had never been a father who asked for help. Pride was stitched into the fabric of his bones, but this was bigger than pride. He pressed the call button. The line rang once. Twice? Then? Pop? Everything okay? That voice, warm, strong, full of concern, nearly broke him. Lawrence cleared his throat. Son, we need to talk. Silence filled the other end. Not confusion, but worry. Pop. What happened? Lawrence hesitated. He felt Evelyn's eyes on him, pleading silently. Malcolm. Our landlord. He's trying to force us out. The line went dead silent, not empty. Not dismissive. The kind of silence that meant someone was thinking, calculating, preparing. What exactly did he do? Malcolm asked, voice low. Controlled. Lawrence told him everything. The inspection. The lies, the threats, the letter. He didn't mention the racial slurs. Didn't mention the humiliation, but Malcolm heard it anyway. A son always hears the things his father doesn't say. Pop. Malcolm's tone shifted, firm, sharp, dangerous. Listen to me carefully. If he sends another letter, if he knocks on your door, if he even looks at you wrong, you call me. Immediately. Understand? Lawrence closed his eyes. I don't want you to disrupt your work, Pop. Malcolm cut him off. You and Mama are my work. You're the reason I became who I am. Evelyn's breath caught. She placed a hand over her mouth, tears flowing freely. Malcolm continued, You protected me my whole life. Now it's my turn. Lawrence felt his throat tighten, not with fear this time, but with pride. I'll call you, son. If things get worse, I'll call you. Malcolm's voice softened. I love you both. I'll check in soon. When Lawrence hung up, the apartment felt different. Not safe. Not yet, but no longer hopeless. Because now, they weren't standing alone. 2 days later, Lawrence checked the mail again. And there it was, a second envelope, but this time, it wasn't just eviction. It was war. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of morning that made old bones ache and memories feel heavier. Lawrence walked toward the lobby with slow, steady steps. He didn't want to open that mailbox again. Didn't want to see another envelope. Didn't want to feel that crushing weight. But life doesn't wait for readiness. It only moves forward. He unlocked the metal door. Bills, coupons, church flyers. And then, he saw it. Another white and gold envelope. Thicker this time. Heavier. Deadlier. His fingers tightened around it, the paper crinkling under his grip. Back inside the apartment, Evelyn looked up from her chair. Lawrence. Is that? He nodded silently. She covered her mouth. He opened the envelope. Inside were printed pages, not one. Not two, but 11 pages of complaints, accusations, fabricated violations. And photos taken at strange angles designed to mislead. It wasn't an eviction notice. It was a final warning. Compliance violation packet meant to make one thing clear. Leave voluntarily or be removed legally. The lies were bold. Unauthorized gatherings inside Unit 3B. Noise complaints from multiple neighbors. Unsanitary conditions posing health hazards. Tenant creating hostile environment for building staff. Lawrence felt his heartbeat thud slower. Harder, louder. We don't even have gatherings, Evelyn cried. We hardly have visitors. Lawrence, this is insane. He rubbed his forehead, trying to breathe. This wasn't a warning. This was a trap. He turned to page 4. A photo of their kitchen, but cropped just enough to make it look cluttered. The counter full of pots because Evelyn had been cooking. Sunday dinner. Page 6 showed the water stain, but edited to look fresh. As if it had just happened. Page 9 was the hallway with a red circle around a small scuff on the wall. Something that had been there since 2014. Evelyn gripped his arm. Lawrence. He's building a case. Lawrence nodded slowly. He doesn't want us gone quietly, he whispered. He wants to destroy us on paper first, and then... Something else caught his eye. Page 11. A signature. Colton J. Reeves, property director, and beneath it, a handwritten line. Vacate peacefully and you won't have to face legal consequences. Lawrence's stomach twisted. This wasn't documentation. This was intimidation. He stood up, suddenly breathless. He needed air. He walked toward the balcony, opening the sliding door. And there across the courtyard stood Colton, leaning against the railing. Sunglasses on, arms folded, watching. Smirking. Not hiding, not pretending, not ashamed. Just enjoying the show. Lawrence felt a cold wave rush through him. The humiliation, the cruelty, the arrogance. Colton raised his coffee cup and gave a mock salute. Lawrence's fists clenched. But he didn't move. He wouldn't give that man the satisfaction. He stepped back inside and closed the balcony door softly. Evelyn approached him, voice breaking. What do we do now, Lawrence? He looked down at the packet, then at his phone, then at the picture of Malcolm on the fridge. He exhaled deeply. We call our son. He picked up the phone, but before dialing, he stopped, because at that exact moment, a sharp, aggressive knock echoed through the apartment. Bam, bam. Lawrence's eyes widened. Evelyn froze. Voice from outside shouted, Mr. Carter, open up. We have new evidence to discuss. Lawrence exchanged a terrified glance with Evelyn. Colton had come back. And this time, he wasn't alone. When Lawrence opened the door, he didn't just face Colton. He faced two armed security officers standing behind him. And Colton's next demand would cross a line that Malcolm could never ignore. The pounding on the door didn't stop. Bam, bam. Each hit felt like it shook the walls, like it dug claws into the Carter's peace and ripped it open. Lawrence moved toward the door slowly, not out of fear, but out of a lifetime of carrying dignity even through humiliation. He unlocked the latch. Opened the door, and there he was, Colton Reeves, smiling like a man who believed the world belonged to him. But today, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood two armed security officers, uniforms crisp, hands resting on holsters, eyes cold and ready. Evelyn gasped. She stumbled back, covering her mouth. Lawrence's heart kicked hard in his chest. Morning, Mr. Carter, Colton said cheerfully. Hope you're ready to cooperate today. Lawrence steadied his voice. What do you want now, Colton? Colton stepped forward, waving a fresh set of papers in the air. We've received new evidence, he said, dripping sarcasm. Apparently, you've been violating the lease even more than we knew. Lawrence didn't move. My wife and I haven't violated anything. Colton's grin faded into something darker. Well, we'll see about that. He turned to the officers. Search the unit. Evelyn's breath shattered. You can't do that. This is our home. You have no right. Colton shrugged. Building policy gives me authorization to conduct emergency inspections when tenants are non-compliant. That's not true, Lawrence snapped. Colton leaned in close, eyes glittering. Prove it. The officers began stepping forward. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. Lawrence lifted a hand, blocking the doorway. You're not stepping foot in my home. Colton raised an eyebrow. You sure about that, old man? The officers' hands tightened on their holsters. A cold, suffocating silence filled the hallway. And then, Colton said the words that shattered everything. If you refuse inspection, I'll have these officers escort your wife out first. She looks fragile. Shouldn't be too hard. Evelyn choked. Lawrence's entire body went still. That wasn't harassment. Wasn't intimidation. Wasn't property policy. It was a threat. Direct threat against his wife. Something broke inside him. Something he had spent 70 years controlling. He stepped forward. Voice low and deadly calm. You touch my wife? You even look at her wrong. And I swear on everything holy, this entire city will hear what you've done. Colton smirked. Oh, trust me, Mr. Carter. Nobody cares. And that was when Lawrence reached for his phone. Not to call the police. Not to call a neighbor. Not to call management, but to call his son. He dialed Malcolm's number with shaking hands. The phone rang once. Pop? Lawrence's voice cracked. Son, come home. A silence filled the line. A quiet, charged silence that felt like thunder waiting to strike. I'm on my way, Malcolm said. No matter what time it is. No matter what I'm doing. I'm coming. Before Lawrence could respond, Malcolm added one more line. And Pop? Don't let that man inside. No matter what he says. Lawrence ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He looked at Colton, not with fear, but with something else. A warning. Colton saw a 2-dot, and for the first time. His smirk faltered. That night, a black SUV pulled into the courtyard. A tall figure stepped out, coat swinging, badge glimmering under the streetlights. Judge Malcolm Carter had arrived. Night settled over Ridgeview Heights like a heavy blanket, thick and tense. The courtyard lights flickered softly, humming against the cold air. Inside apartment 3B, Lawrence and Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, hands intertwined, hearts racing with each passing minute. Then, at exactly 9:17 p.m., the low growl of an engine echoed outside. A sleek black SUV rolled into the courtyard, polished metal glinting under the street lamps. The vehicle stopped with a quiet authority, a kind that didn't need to announce itself. The driver's door opened. A tall, commanding figure stepped out. Dark overcoat. Crisp suit underneath. Badge clipped inside the jacket, visible only when the coat parted. Judge Malcolm Carter had come home. His footsteps were firm, steady, echoing against the concrete like the arrival of justice itself. Inside the apartment, Evelyn looked toward the window. "He's here," she whispered. Tears already gathering. Lawrence stood slowly, his breath trembling not from fear, but from the overwhelming sight of the little boy he raised, now returning as a protector. A knock, gentle, respectful, tapped against the door. Lawrence opened it, and there he was. Malcolm met his father's eyes, and for a moment, the weight of years hung between them. "Pop," Malcolm said softly. Lawrence swallowed hard. "Son." Evelyn rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Malcolm like she had been holding her breath for days. "My baby," she whispered. "Thank God you're here." Malcolm held her tight, eyes closed, jaw clenched. Then he stepped inside and the warmth left his expression. This wasn't a family moment anymore. This was a mission. "Tell me everything," he said. Voice deep, controlled. Lawrence placed the folders, the warning packet, and the eviction notice on the table. Malcolm flipped through each page with surgical focus. His eyes narrowed as he read the fabricated violations. His jaw locked when he saw Colton's signature. But the moment he reached the handwritten thread at the bottom of the last page, "Vacate peacefully," his expression turned from anger into something far colder. A threat, Malcolm stated. Legally actionable. Intimidation, coercion, falsified documentation, racial discrimination. And that's just page 1. He shut the file slowly. "I'm going to handle this." Evelyn touched his arm. "Baby, he's dangerous." Malcolm shook his head. "No, Mama, he's arrogant." "There's a difference." Before anyone could respond, a loud voice echoed from down the hallway. Well, look who finally showed up." Colton. Malcolm turned toward the doorway. Colton stood there with that familiar smirk, hands in pockets. Shoulders relaxed, attitude dripping with entitlement. "I heard a very important guest arrived," Colton mocked. "Didn't know royalty was visiting our humble building." Malcolm stepped forward. The air thickened. "Are you Colton Reeves?" Malcolm asked. Colton scoffed. "Depends who's asking." Malcolm pulled his coat aside. A silver badge glinted under the kitchen light. United States Federal Judge Malcolm J. Carter. Colton's smirk evaporated. Malcolm's voice dropped to a level colder than steel. "I'm the man who's going to make sure you lose everything you thought you owned." For the first time, Colton took a step back. Fear entered his eyes, real fear. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The next morning, Malcolm walked into the property office, and what he discovered inside Colton's files would expose a decade of corruption. Morning sunlight crept across Ridgeview Heights, but the warmth never reached the air. Not today. Not after what happened the night before. At 8:06 a.m., Malcolm Carter stepped out of apartment 3B. Dark suit, polished shoes, a presence that filled the hallway like a storm about to break. Every tenant he passed looked twice. Something about him radiated power, calm, and danger all at once. He didn't need to announce who he was. The building could feel it. Malcolm Walked straight to the property office. No hesitation. No fear. Only purpose. Inside, the receptionist Donna nearly jumped. J. Judge Carter. I didn't know you were still. I need access to the tenant files, he said, voice controlled but firm. Every document, every record, every complaint filed under this building for the past 10 years. Donna's face paled. She looked at the closed door of the manager's office. Then back at Malcolm. Mr. Reeves isn't here yet. And I don't think... Malcolm stepped closer. Tone lowering into authority that couldn't be questioned. Ma'am? I am not asking. Something in his eyes, sharp, intelligent, unforgiving, made her swallow hard. She nodded and unlocked the back filing cabinet. Malcolm pulled out folders, dozens of them, and placed them on the counter. He opened the first within seconds. His jaw tightened. Tenant evictions, 2023 7 black tenants. 4 elderly. All evicted within 2 months. Next folder. Code violations reported by tenants. Ignored by management. But the official paperwork claimed no issues found. Next folder. Rent increases. Black tenants raised 18%. White tenants raised 3%. Next. Noise complaints. Dates didn't match. Signatures didn't match. Some weren't even real names. Malcolm's eyes darkened. This isn't mismanagement, he muttered. This is a pattern. Evelyn and Lawrence's file sat at the bottom of the stack, thin at first glance, but filled with photos and fabricated statements. Malcolm opened it carefully. His hand stopped on page 3. A signature. Not Lawrence's, not Evelyn's. A forged one. Next page. More lies, more fake building reports. Next folder. Then another. And then Malcolm froze. A red file. Labeled Priority Removals, Phase 2. He opened it. Inside, a typed list of upcoming targets, black residents. All elderly. All living on rent control. Each name marked with a date for planned removal. Malcolm felt his stomach sink. This wasn't just about his parents. This was a racial cleansing strategy disguised as property management. He closed the file. Slowly. His silence was no longer calm, it was deadly. At that moment, the office door swung open. Colton stepped in, sunglasses on, sipping iced coffee, humming a tune. He froze when he saw Malcolm standing over the files. What the hell do you think you're doing? Colton snapped. Malcolm turned around, not angry, not shouting, just cold, investigating crimes. Colton scoffed. This is private property. Those files are confidential. Malcolm held up the red folder. So is racial discrimination. Yet here we are. Colton's face went white. He lunged forward, but Malcolm raised a hand. Don't, he warned softly. Because I promise you, you're one step away from a federal case. Colton stopped. Not because he respected the warning, but because, for the first time in his life, he was outmatched. That afternoon, Malcolm called someone powerful, someone even Colton never expected. When she walked into the building, every tenant stepped outside in shock, because the Attorney General herself had arrived. The afternoon sun dipped low, stretching long shadows across the courtyard. But the air wasn't quiet. Not today. Tenants whispered near their doors. Curtains shifted. Old men paused their chess game outside. Everyone sensed something coming. Something bigger than the building. Bigger than Colton. Bigger than years of silence. Inside apartment 3B, Malcolm stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Voice calm but edged with steel. Yes. I have the files. Yes, all documented. Yes, it's systemic. He paused, eyes narrowing. I think you'll want to see this personally. He hung up. Lawrence, sitting in his recliner, watched him with a mixture of pride and fear. Son. Who did you call? Malcolm's answer was a name Lawrence never expected to hear. The State Attorney General. Evelyn nearly dropped the cup she was holding. Oh my lord. Malcolm. She needs to see it, Malcolm said. And she's not the type to ignore injustice. Minutes passed. Then an hour. But at exactly 3:42 p.m., the building's entrance door opened, and the entire energy of the courtyard shifted. A fa-suf, a-dud. Convoy of 2 black vehicles pulled up. Out stepped a tall woman in a tailored suit. Silver hair pulled back, expression sharp as a blade. Attorney General Victoria Hawley, one of the most feared legal minds in the state. A woman known for dismantling corrupt systems, one case at a time. Tenants gasped softly. Some whispered her name. Some clutched their chests. Even the pigeons on the rooftop seemed to freeze. Malcolm walked out of apartment 3B to meet her. "Judge Carter," she greeted him, shaking his hand. "Your call said it was urgent." "It is," Malcolm replied, handing her the red folder. "The discrimination isn't isolated. It's a systematic purge. And it's been happening for years." Victoria Hawley flipped through the pages quickly, but thoroughly brow-tightening with each line. Fabricated violations. Forged signatures. Targeted elderly black tenants. Rent manipulation. Retaliatory evictions. Her voice became ice. "This is criminal." Behind them, tenants had gathered, dozens now quiet, hopeful faces lining the balconies and hallways. Colton stepped out of the office just then. When he saw her, he froze. What is she doing here? He asked TAMMERED. Victoria Hawley didn't even turn toward him. She addressed Malcolm instead. "Where is the property director?" Malcolm simply nodded toward Colton. She turned slowly. Colton's bravado melted like cheap plastic under fire. "Mr. Reeves," she said, voice calm. "You are hereby informed that an official investigation is being opened into your conduct and the operations of Reeves Property Group." Colton forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here," and she raised a hand. Silence. The entire courtyard went dead still. "You will provide full access to every file, every ledger, every tenant complaint, and every internal communication. Or you will be taken into custody today." Colton's mouth opened, but no words came out. Victoria Hawley stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough that the weight of each syllable crushed him. "You threatened elderly residents. You falsified documents. You targeted vulnerable tenants. And you attempted to intimidate the family of a federal judge." Colton swallowed hard. His face drained of color. In the crowd, someone whispered, "He's done." Another, "Finally." Someone listened. Victoria turned to Malcolm. "Judge Carter? Shall we proceed?" Malcolm nodded. And for the first time in years, the tenants of Ridgeview Heights saw justice walk through their front yard. Tomorrow morning, the entire building will gather in the courtyard, because the Attorney General is returning with arrest warrants, but nobody expects what Colton tries to do next. Not even Malcolm. The next morning, Ridgeview Heights didn't feel like an apartment complex. It felt like a courthouse. Tenants stood outside in robes, slippers, Sunday dresses, some leaning on walkers, some holding coffee cups with trembling hands. They waited in silence, breath visible in the cold air. At exactly 9 a.m., 2 black government vehicles rolled into the courtyard. Doors opened. Attorney General Victoria Hawley stepped out with 3 investigators and a state marshal. Hums spread through the crowd. Lawrence held Evelyn's hand tightly, his heart pounding. Malcolm stood tall beside them, every inch the judge, but every heartbeat still a son protecting his family. Across the courtyard, Colton stormed out of the office. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair disheveled. Panic barely hidden beneath the thin mask of arrogance he once wore proudly. "This is harassment," he shouted. "You can't come here without my lawyers." Victoria Hawley didn't break stride. "Mr. Reeves," she said, pulling out a folder thick with evidence, "you falsified legal documents, committed elder harassment, racially targeted tenants, forged signatures, manipulated rent, and threatened an elderly woman with forced removal." Gasps rose from the tenants. Colton's jaw clenched. "You have no proof?" Victoria lifted the red folder. "I have all the proof." Malcolm stepped forward, voice steady, "and I have sworn witness testimony." Colton's eyes darted around like a cornered animal searching for an escape. Then he snapped, "You people don't belong here." He screamed, pointing wildly at the tenants. "This building is mine. MY investment. MY profits. You're all dead weight holding it back." The courtyard went silent. not the silence of fear, but the silence of truth finally showing its face. Victoria nodded at the marshal. That's enough. The marshal stepped forward. Mr. Colton Reeves, by order of the state of Georgia, you are under arrest for fraud, discrimination, harassment, elder abuse, and obstruction of justice. Handcuffs snapped around Colton's wrists. He fought. He cursed. He screamed. This isn't over. I'll sue all of you. You can't do this to me. I'm powerful. Malcolm stepped toward him, calm as ever. No, Colton. You were powerful because people were afraid to speak. He gestured toward the crowd. But they're not afraid anymore. For the first time, Colton looked around, really looked, and saw the faces of the people he had hurt. Faces no longer bowed. Faces no longer fearful. His strength collapsed. The marshal escorted him to the vehicle, past the tenants, past Malcolm, past Evelyn and Lawrence, who stood hand in hand, heads held high. Evelyn whispered, voice shaking, God is good. Lawrence nodded slowly, always. Victoria Hawley turned to them. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Your home is safe, permanently. Evelyn covered her mouth, tears falling freely. Malcolm placed a gentle hand on his father's shoulder. You're not just tenants. Pop, Malcolm said softly. You're survivors. Lawrence's eyes filled. Son? We couldn't have done this without you. Malcolm looked at both of them, the parents who took him in when he had no one. You gave me a home, he whispered. I simply made sure you kept it. The sun rose higher, warming the courtyard. The tenants slowly began to smile. For the first time in a long time, justice had come home.